37 seconds. That was exactly the time that separated humanity from total war on the Temple Mount in September 2023. Israeli guards, Palestinian protesters, and between them, a stone. Just a stone. But it wasn't just any stone. It was the stone that a prophet named Zechariah said would drag all the nations of the world to a single point of conflict. And as you watch this video, at this very second, there are 23 security cameras pointed at that same mount. Why? Because something was triggered. Something that was written 2,500 years ago is happening now. On your timeline, in your news feed, in your reality. And most people didn't even realize the timer had started. Zechariah wasn't a journalist. He didn't have a smartphone. He didn't have access to satellites or intelligence reports. But he described with surgical precision 5 events that you can verify now, today, with a simple search. And when you finish this video, you won't see the news the same way. Because Zechariah didn't predict the future. He saw the future. And the future has already begun. First prophecy, Zechariah chapter 12, verse 3. On that day I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will be severely injured, and all the nations of the earth will gather against it. Read that again. A stone. Jerusalem. Injuries. Nations. Gathering. This is not poetry. It's a code. And the code is being unlocked now, December 20th, 2017. The President of the United States recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. In 48 hours, 128 countries vote against this decision at the UN. 128 nations from all over the world who barely agree on climate, on vaccines, on absolutely anything, suddenly have a unanimous opinion about a city of 825,000 inhabitants. Why? Because the stone was placed in the center of the board. But Zechariah was even more specific. He didn't just say that the nations would come, he said that Jerusalem would be a cup of staggering. Chapter 12, verse 2. A cup that intoxicates, that confuses, which leads world leaders to make irrational decisions. And that's exactly what's happening. Countries without a border with Israel, with no history of direct conflict, are suddenly investing billions in narratives, in propaganda, in geopolitical positioning. Russia, China, the European Union, all orbiting around a single coordinate on the map. And Zechariah wrote this when Jerusalem was just rubble. Here's the blood-curdling part. He said all who lift it will be severely injured, lifting a heavy stone, trying to move Jerusalem, trying to divide Jerusalem. And what happened to every government that tried? Look at the data. 6 Israeli prime ministers who proposed territorial division involving Jerusalem. 5 lost their positions in scandals or catastrophic elections. 1 died in circumstances still under investigation. On the Palestinian side, 3 leaders who accepted negotiations involving the status of Jerusalem. All assassinated or exiled, the stone hurts. Exactly as Zechariah said. And this is not conspiracy theory, it's historical record. And the more you research, the more patterns emerge, the more impossible coincidences appear, the more chance becomes design. Now think about this. Zechariah was alone when he wrote. He had no editorial committee. He had no political advisors. He had no think tanks predicting the geopolitics of the 21st century. And yet he predicted that Jerusalem would be the epicenter of a global conflict, that nations would unite against it, and that this union would cause injury to those who tried to move it. And all of this is documented. UN votes, Security Council resolutions, Arab League statements, European Union positions, treaties between Russia and Iran, Chinese investments in the new Silk Road that strategically passes through Israel. The piece is on the board, and the whole world is watching it. But if you think this prophecy is intense, wait. Because the next one involves dirty money, betrayal, and a field that still exists in Jerusalem with soil stained red. Zechariah chapter 11, verses 12 and 13. They weighed out my wages, 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said to me, "Throw it to the potter, that magnificent price at which they valued me." So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them to the potter in the house of the Lord. Now pay attention. Zechariah wrote this 500 years before Christ was born. 500 years before there was a traitor named Judas. 500 years before someone sold the Messiah for 30 pieces of silver. And he described the exact value, the exact destination of the coins, and the exact location, the house of the Lord, the temple. Matthew chapter 27 records that Judas, consumed by remorse, threw the 30 pieces of silver into the temple. The priest took the money and said, "We cannot put this into the temple treasury because it is blood money." So they bought the potter's field to bury foreigners. Can you see what just happened? Zechariah wasn't just prophesying about Jesus. He was codifying a system of validation, a checkpoint that is impossible to rig, because no one, no imposter, no fake Messiah could orchestrate the exact value, the exact location, and the exact destination of a betrayal that hadn't even happened yet. Think of the mathematical probability. First, the value. 30 pieces of silver was the legal price for a slave killed accidentally, according to Exodus 21, verse 32. Zechariah chose that specific number. Second, the destination. To throw the coins into the temple. Third, the priest's refusal. Fourth, the purchase of the potter's field. Fifth, the purpose of the field. To bury foreigners. Each layer is a layer of validation. And Matthew recorded that all of this happened exactly as Zechariah wrote 500 years earlier. But there's more, much more, because that field, the field of blood, Hakeldama in Aramaic, still exists. You can visit it today. You can see the red soil, stained not only by iron, but by the memory of a transaction that Zechariah saw through time. And this connects directly to what is happening now in Jerusalem. Because there are groups at this moment creating sacred utensils for the Third Temple, the Temple Institute in Jerusalem, founded in 1987. They have the priestly garments woven according to Exodus 28. They have the menorah of pure gold. They have the musical instruments. They even have the high priest's crown, and more. They created the complete architectural plans for the Third Temple. Floor plan, elevations, materials, everything ready. And in 2022, 5 red heifers were brought from Texas to Israel. Why? Because Numbers chapter 19 describes the purification ritual using the ashes of a completely spotless red heifer. And these heifers were genetically selected to meet this requirement. They are being raised now, monitored, awaiting the moment. Zechariah chapter 6 speaks of a man named Rebranch who will build the temple of the Lord. Christians interpret this as Christ building the spiritual church. But there is an Orthodox Jewish movement that believes it is fulfilling this prophecy literally. They have funding from donors around the world. They have engineers. They have rabbis trained in Levitical law. And they are just waiting for the right political moment. Zechariah's prophecy about the temple is not ancient history. It is future news. And the clock is ticking. Because when the temple is rebuilt, other prophecies will cascade. Daniel chapter 9, Matthew chapter 24, Revelation chapter 11, all connected, all dependent on the temple standing. And Zechariah saw it. He saw the betrayal, he saw the money, he saw the field, and he saw the temple being prepared for the final act. Now, if you're starting to feel a chill, hold on tight. Because the third prophecy is the most disturbing of all, and it involves technology that Zechariah shouldn't have known about. Technology that would only make sense 2.5 millennia later. And when you understand what he described, you'll realize that we are closer to the end than any previous generation imagined. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 12. This will be the plague, with which the Lord will strike all the peoples who waged war against Jerusalem. Their flesh will be consumed while they are still standing. Their eyes will melt in their sockets, and their tongues will rot in their mouths. Read that again. Slowly, the flesh is consumed, while the person is standing. The eyes melt. The tongue rots, all happening at the same time. Zechariah lived in a time of swords, of spears, of arrows, of catapults hurling stones. The most advanced warfare he knew involved prolonged sieges and strategic famine. And suddenly he described something that didn't exist, something that shouldn't exist, something that would only make sense much, much later. On August 6, 1945, at 8:15 a.m., an American bomber called the Enola Gay dropped a bomb on Hiroshima. The bomb's name, Little Boy. 15 kilotons of force. And the Japanese doctors who arrived hours later recorded something they had never seen before. Victims still standing, dead, but standing. Skin peeling from bones, eyes melted out of their sockets, necrotic tongues inside still open mouths. They called it flash death. The thermal radiation reached 7,000 degrees Celsius in a fraction of a second. The flesh evaporated before the body had time to fall. The shadows of the people were burned into the walls, permanent silhouettes of disintegrated bodies. And Zacharias described it, word for word, symptom by symptom, effect by effect. He didn't use technical terms because they didn't exist. He used what he had: flesh, eyes, tongue, standing. But he described the exact sequence of a thermonuclear explosion. Now here's the part nobody wants to talk about out loud. He said this would happen to all the peoples who waged war against Jerusalem. Not against the United States, not against Russia, against Jerusalem. And look at the current map. Israel is the only country in the Middle East that officially admits to ambiguous nuclear capabilities. The Israeli policy of nuclear ambiguity was exposed by Mordecai Vanunu, a nuclear technician who leaked photos of the Dimona reactor in 1986. He spent 18 years in prison, but the photos confirmed it. Israel has between 80 and 400 nuclear warheads. And the Samson Doctrine, documented by journalist Seymour Hersh, states that if Israel faces existential annihilation, it will use its arsenal against all enemy capitals simultaneously. All peoples, Tehran, Damascus, Cairo, Moscow, all at the same time. Mutually assured destruction expanded, and Zechariah's description ceases to be ancient, it ceases to be symbolic, and it becomes strategic. Military protocol codified in prophetic language. But wait, there's more. Because Zechariah continues in verse 13. On that day, there will be a great tumult from the Lord among them. Each one will seize the hand of his neighbor, and each one will raise his hand against the hand of his neighbor. This isn't just a description of nuclear war. It's a description of command collapse, of total chaos, of soldiers attacking soldiers, of alliances shattering in real time. And we're seeing the first signs of this now. NATO is divided over Israel. Turkey is a NATO member but supports Hamas. The United States supplies weapons to Israel but pushes for a ceasefire. Russia supplies technology to Iran but maintains communication with Israel. China invests in Israeli infrastructure but votes against Israel at the UN. Each one will seize the hand of his neighbor, and each one will raise his hand against the hand of his neighbor. Contradictory alliances, double loyalties, and when the final pressure comes, everything collapses. Exactly as Zechariah said. And here's the chilling detail. Zechariah wrote about a plague that consumes flesh while standing, and in 2024, military scientists are developing electromagnetic pulse weapons and directed energy weapons that can cook human tissue from the inside out without blowing up buildings. Technology is catching up with prophecy, and prophecy is validating technology. But Zechariah didn't just stay in the abstract. He gave coordinates. He gave geology. He gave a place you can go to now, today, and verify. And when you see what modern science has discovered about that place, you'll understand that we are living in the time Zechariah looked at through the centuries. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 4. On that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives east of Jerusalem. The Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west, forming a very large valley. Half of the mountain will move toward the north and the other half toward the south. This is not vague language. This is prophetic GPS. Zechariah gave the exact location. Mount of Olives, the direction of the split, east to west, the geometry of the division, north half, south half, and he said this would happen when his feet touched the mountain. Christians believe this refers to the second coming of Christ. Jews believe it is the Messiah who is yet to come for the first time, but both agree. This event is literal, physical, geological. It's not a metaphor. It's an earthquake. And here's what will get your heart racing. In 2016, geologists from Ben-Gurion University published a study on the geological fault that runs through the Mount of Olives, the technical name Jordan Valley Fault, also known as the Dead Sea Transform Fault. It runs north to south under the mountain, exactly where Zechariah said the mountain would split. And this fault is active. It moves approximately 5 millimeters per year. Small earthquakes are constantly recorded. In 1927, a magnitude 6.2 earthquake struck the region and caused cracks visible to this day in the Mount of Olives. In 2004, another tremor of magnitude 5.1. In 2018, magnitude 4.6. The mountain is trembling, the fault is moving, and the direction of tectonic pressure is pushing the African plate and the Arabian plate in opposite directions. The point of greatest accumulated tension? The Mount of Olives, exactly where Zechariah said. Modern science is confirming the structural possibility of an east-west rift. Israeli geologists mapped the fault system using ground-penetrating radar, and they discovered that there is an underground fracture that runs exactly in the direction Zechariah described, east to west, dividing the mountain in half, north and south. And when an earthquake of sufficient magnitude hits that fault, the mountain will split like a ripe fruit cut by an invisible blade. Zechariah wrote this when geology didn't even exist as a science, when nobody understood tectonic plates, when earthquakes were seen as divine wrath without natural explanation. And yet he described with surgical precision what modern science would confirm 2,500 years later. Now look at verse 5. You will flee through the valley of my mountains, for the valley of the mountains will reach to Azel. Yes, you will flee, as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Zechariah mentions a historical earthquake in the days of King Uzziah, about 760 years before Christ. And archaeologists have found physical evidence of this earthquake, layers of destruction in excavations in Hazor, Gezer, and Samaria, all dated precisely to that period. He used a past geological event as validation for a future geological event. And the local population of Jerusalem, even today, has planned evacuation routes that pass through the valley of Jehoshaphat, the valley that would be formed by the division of the mountain. This is not isolated prophecy. It is prophecy with infrastructure, with historical memory, with modern urban planning based on ancient text. And there's more. Zechariah says the valley will reach Azel. Azel is a place mentioned only here in the entire Bible. No one knows exactly where it is. But scholars believe it's east of Jerusalem, towards the Judean desert. And if the mountain splits from east to west, creating a valley that extends eastward, people would flee in exactly that direction, away from the city, to the desert, where there is less population density, fewer buildings to collapse, more open space. Zechariah not only predicted the earthquake, he predicted the escape route. And that route makes geographical, geological, and strategic sense. All this written when Jerusalem was a small city, without skyscrapers, without modern urban planning, without seismographs to measure tremors. And yet, every detail fits. Now, if you're thinking that's impressive, prepare yourself, because the fifth prophecy connects everything. Heavy stone, 30 pieces of silver, nuclear plague, mountain splitting, and it ties it all together in a final event that's being assembled right now on your timeline with geopolitical chess pieces you can track in real time. Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout aloud, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. This prophecy was fulfilled when Jesus entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. Crowds shouting Hosanna. Palm branches on the ground, a donkey, humble, rejected days later, crucified, exultantly as Zechariah described 500 years earlier. But Zechariah didn't stop there. He wrote a second act. And the second act isn't humble, it's catastrophic. Zechariah chapter 14, verses 3 and 4. The Lord will go out and fight against those nations as he fought on the day of battle. On that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives. First he comes riding on a donkey, meek, rejected, betrayed for 30 pieces of silver, dead, resurrected, ascended. But in the second coming he returns as a warrior. And here is the connection that no one talks about. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 2. I will gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. The city will be taken. The houses will be plundered. The women raped. Half of the city will go into captivity, but the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city. This is the prophecy of the final siege. All the nations. Not some, not a group. All. And Zechariah gives strategic details that sound like a military intelligence report. The city will be taken, successful invasion, the houses will be plundered, urban looting, the women raped, war crime. Half the city will be taken captive, mass deportation, but the rest will remain. Resistance continues, and it is in this moment of total annihilation that verse 3 takes place. The Lord will go forth and fight. He will not send angels. He will not send human armies. He himself will fight. And when his feet touch the Mount of Olives, the mountain will split open, the valley will open, and the geography of the battle will instantly change. And now observe the current geopolitical scenario. The UN has 193 member countries. 128 have already voted against decisions involving Jerusalem. Military treaties are intertwining Russia, Iran, Turkey. Exactly the nations mentioned in Ezekiel 38, Magog, Persia, Togarmah. And these prophecies complement Zechariah. China is investing in the new Silk Road, which strategically passes through Israel, and for the first time in history, it is logistically possible for all nations to join in direct or indirect conflict against a single geographical point. Satellites, drones, intercontinental missiles, aircraft carriers, special forces. Everything could converge in Jerusalem in a matter of hours. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 9. The Lord will be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord will be one, and his name one. This is not the end of a religion. It is the end of all agendas, of all systems, of all nations, of all governments, of all ideologies. And Zechariah says this happens after the siege, after the plague, after the mountain splits open, after the valley forms, after the king returns. And after the final battle is won not by human armies, but by direct intervention. And he ends the chapter with something surreal. Verse 16. All who remain of all the nations that came against Jerusalem will go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord Almighty, and to celebrate the Festival of Tabernacles. Survivors of enemy nations, worshiping in Jerusalem, celebrating Jewish festivals. This is forced reconciliation, imposed peace, a global theocratic kingdom. And Zechariah even describes the agriculture of this period. Verse 17. If any of the families of the earth do not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord Almighty, they will have no rain. He is describing a system where worship is connected to the weather, where obedience brings rain, where rebellion brings drought. And this sounds absurd until you realize that weather modification technology already exists. Cloud seeding, atmospheric ionization, precipitation control. China used this at the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Israel has had cloud seeding programs since the 1950s. And Zechariah is describing a kingdom where the weather is governed not by human technology, but by divine decree connected to behavior. Every detail that seemed impossible when it was written now seems plausible, and every detail that seemed symbolic now seems literal. And this is not modern reinterpretation forcing ancient prophecy into contemporary molds. It is ancient prophecy revealing its literal nature as technology and geopolitics catch up with the scenario it described. You have just seen 5 prophecies: a heavy stone that stuns nations, betrayal for 30 pieces of silver that validated the Messiah, a plague that consumes flesh like radiation, a mountain that splits at the exact geological fault, and a final siege that connects modern geopolitics with ancient scripture. And each of these prophecies has elements that are being fulfilled now. Not soon, not in some distant future. Now. Jerusalem is at the center of conflicts involving the UN, NATO, the Arab League, and the Security Council. The Third Temple has complete infrastructure, waiting only for the political moment. Israel has documented nuclear capability and doctrine for its use in annihilation. The Mount of Olives fault is active, monitored by seismographs, mapped by radar. And international treaties are aligning nations precisely in the blocks that Zechariah and Ezekiel described: Russia with Iran, Turkey wavering, China expanding, Europe divided, the United States under pressure, and at the center of it all, a small city with great weight: Jerusalem, the heavy stone. The timer that started at the beginning of this video is not a metaphor, it's real. And the question isn't whether these prophecies will be fulfilled. All the evidence points to progressive fulfillment. The question is, are you paying attention? Because Zechariah didn't write to scare people. He wrote to prepare them, and preparation begins with vigilance. Jesus said in Matthew 24, verse 42, "Watch therefore, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming." And vigilance is not paranoia. It's not panic. It's not isolation in bunkers waiting for the apocalypse. Vigilance is perception. It's connecting the dots. It's understanding that when a prophet describes nuclear technology, tectonic geography, and international politics with surgical precision 2,500 years before these things existed, something beyond chance is at work. Something beyond luck. Something beyond coincidence. Design, purpose, divine chronology unfolding in real time. So here's what you do now. If you're one of the people who understands that this isn't random internet content, that this isn't unfounded conspiracy theory, that this is a real checkpoint on your personal and collective timeline, leave your confirmation in the comments. It can be a word, vigilant. It can be a verse that touched you. It can just be a sign that you're keeping up. Because this creates a community of people who aren't passively watching the future as entertainment. They are actively mapping the future as a responsibility. And subscribe to the channel, because the next analysis will explore the book of Daniel. And when you cross-reference Daniel's 70 weeks with Zechariah's prophecies, the timelines align in a way that will completely change your perception of where we are on the prophetic clock. Daniel saw empires, Zechariah saw battles, John in Revelation saw the throne, and they all saw the same end, the same king, the same Jerusalem, and the same moment when everything converges. Zechariah ended his book with a promise. Chapter 14, verse 21. On that day there will no longer be a Canaanite in the house of the Lord of hosts. Canaanite is code for merchant, for a corrupt trade system, for human agendas infiltrated into the sacred. And Zechariah is saying that when all this is fulfilled, the system will be purified, the house will be restored, commerce will be holy, and the king will reign without opposition, without corruption, without hidden agendas. And this is not naive utopia. It is a prophetic promise with a set date. We don't know the day or the hour, but we know the sequence, and the sequence has already begun. The stone is on the board, the silver has been paid, the plague is described, the mountain is cracked from below, and the nations are gathering. You're not watching a video about ancient prophecies gathering dust in theological libraries. You're watching a video about your present, about your news, about the political decisions being made right now as you breathe. Because the 5 prophecies of Zechariah aren't in the Bible to be trapped on pages. They're in the Bible to be verified in history, and history is being written now, with stones that wound nations, with silver that validates messiahs, with plagues that consume armies, with mountains that tremble and split, and with nations that gather like dominoes pushing each other toward a single point. Jerusalem. Always Jerusalem. Since Abraham, since David, since Zechariah, since Jesus, and until the end. Jerusalem. The timer has been started, and only those who are vigilant know how to interpret the signs. Are you one of them? Then confirm your presence, leave your signal, and prepare yourself, not with fear, not with despair, but with awareness, with clarity, with the certainty that what Zechariah saw has not ended. It is only beginning. And you have the rare chance, perhaps unique in human history, to see millennia-old prophecies being fulfilled in real time, not told by great-grandparents, not read in history books, but happening now, in your generation, in your time, before your eyes. And this is no accident. You were not born in this era by chance. You were born to witness, to watch, and to be ready when your feet touch the mountain, when the mountain splits open, when the valley opens, and when the King returns.